you very much, my dear brother, really, for this rather very generous introduction. Palestine has millions of lions. The 14 million Palestinians are lions. You are a lion, and all of us are roaring right now to stop the atrocities back there. But let me start, my friends, distinguished audience, friends, by really expressing my gratitude and how pleased I am to be with you today and to address this very distinguished forum. And the thanks are for our friend Mark Domfried and his team, of course, here at the Academy for Cultural Diplomacy for the invite. It is indeed an honor to be here at this particular moment in our history and addressing an issue that is diplomacy and cultural diplomacy that is often overlooked as a component of the overall diplomatic affairs. Indeed, I would argue that cultural diplomacy, my dear Mark, is something that we need to prioritize right now in these very turbulent maybe, and deeply disturbing times. Hard power in the form of military power is threatening us all. From Israel's genocide violence in Gaza to Sudan, Congo, Ukraine, and countless other hot spots around the world, hard power is increasingly the go-to option to resolve disputes, some of which, like the case of Palestine, span over a century of denying rights, a century of abuses. There are two main reasons for this situation. Both are related. One is the weakness of an international order that for too long has been the domain of powerful states to manipulate as they please, and which, as a result, fewer and fewer countries are paying heed today, losing the legitimacy and credibility of a global system that we established as a community of nations together after the horrors of the Second World War. And another reason is the inequality, the asymmetry between actors, both economic and, of course, militarily. After all, if there is no serious chance that an opponent can resist with adequate firepower, and the opponent does not have any significant financial clout to respond with, why invest in lengthy and complicated diplomacy rather than simply let the tanks roll and the bombers fly? This is especially true in the absence of a functioning global order to which we all should appeal to and be subjected to under one equal rules. War and the use of financial coercion. The US is currently imposing sanctions on financial sanctions on 32 countries and territories across the globe. Has, in other words, increasingly replaced traditional diplomacy as a way to resolve conflicts. So my distinguished guests and the audience today, on the face of it, on the very face of it, this is really surprising. Surprising because the world is connected as never before. Goods and people are connected, traversing in an unprecedented volumes. Information about anything, anyone, anywhere is freely available at an incredible speed. Humanity as a whole is a better informed and better educated about the rest of the world than at any point in our history. Ask the young generation now. We know details of various spots of the globe, of the world. We are definitely better informed and better educated, period. We are. Everywhere we look, we see different cultures represented. We hear music and experience art from all over the world. We see movies and read books from directors and authors from every corner and every background. And in a huge metropolis like London, every culture, literally every culture on earth is represented in one way or another. I arrived to this great city when I was much younger as a student in the late 90s, and how much I felt that this is really a special metropolis, special space for all, where not only your difference is acknowledged, but your difference is celebrated. And yet, earlier this month, we witnessed race riots in the UK. In Palestine, even under Israeli military occupation, and with all the restrictions that are imposed on us, we have people coming from everywhere, all over the world, visiting, working, performing, pilgrimage, or simply performing, enjoying our good food, enjoying our good culture, our music. Yet, for the 11th month, my friends, we have watched Israel commit genocide in Gaza, with the full and continued support of its allies in the West. Throughout this month, or these months, we have lived, particularly over the last few weeks, we have lived with the fear of a full-blown regional war after Israel assassinated a Hamas political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, in Iran. Is this a failure of diplomacy? Is it a failure of humanity that dooms attempts at cultural diplomacy and the wider diplomacy, Mark? What is happening? I would argue the opposite. I would argue the opposite. This is not a failure of diplomacy, including cultural diplomacy or soft power. This is, in fact, a failure of hard power. This is a failure of military power. This is a failure of tanks and jet fighters and bombers. So, my friends, the problem with hard power is that unless the aim is strictly limited, a reliance on coercion can only go so far. And it always backlash. You cannot bomb your way to political solutions. You simply can't. You can't. It's been tried throughout history, throughout empires. It never, ever worked. It will never work. And nowhere is a better example of this than my country, my beloved homeland, Palestine. The modern history of Palestine is by now fairly well understood. We can start with the British Empire and its 1917 colonial promise to European Jewry of a homeland in Palestine, which implicitly left Britain opposing Palestinian self-determination 107 years ago. If you read the Balfour Declaration, you can see how the native population, the Palestinian people, were merely rendered as non-Jewish communities. We, who have lived there for millennia, the cradle of civilizations, the hub between East and West, the birthplace of Christianity, where we were defined by that colonial promise, by that colonial declaration, not but by who we are, but by who we are not. And therefore canceling us effectively as a people, as a nation, with our links, with our cultural links to the land. Over the decades, my friends, that followed immigration from Europe that went largely unchecked, bar one period in response to what was called the Arab Revolt from 1936 to 1939, but which more accurately should be probably described as the first Palestinian revolution. And yet, despite the mass immigration and colonial suppression, there was never a Jewish majority in Palestine until the Nakba of 1947-49 and the ethnic cleansing of 2/3 under the watch of Britain. 2/3 of the Palestinian people, my own parents and grandparents included. This disaster, Nakba, as we call it, was never addressed until this very day. Rather than allow the refugees to come home, the new Israeli state did exactly the opposite. It razed hundreds of villages, more than 500 villages and towns and cities. And with its absentee property law, which, by the way, some of them are actually in the homeland, the homeowners, the property owners, the farm owners. Under this absentee property law, in effect, banned the right of return for Palestinians and legalized the theft, the confiscation of their homes, our lands, and our properties. In 1967, as you all know, Israel occupied the rest of historical Palestine and immediately set about the colonial project, the settlement expansion. Both the military occupation and the settlements and the settlement project are illegal, unlawful under international law. In fact, they are very well defined, particularly the settlement building, defined in the Geneva Conventions as war crimes. War crimes. Those who study law here would know that the transfer of the population of the occupying power to the occupied land is a war crime. The recent ruling from the International Court of Justice could not be clearer. That's what it says. That's a ruling. That's the highest court of the land, of the globe. It says the occupation is unlawful and settlements are illegal and must be withdrawn and dismantled. And third parties, and here it's a very important ruling, third parties like the UK, the US, and any other, are prohibited by the ruling of the International Court of Justice from rendering aid or assistance, political, financial, legal, and what have you, military, of course, to Israel to maintain this illegal reality. Yet, my friends, here we are 76 years later and 57 years later, and despite a peace process in the 90s, as you all may have followed, that was supposed to end the occupation and find a political solution based on the two states, Israel still occupies, still settles at accelerated pace our land. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because despite over 100 years of subjugation, of oppression and repression, despite Israel's ethnic cleansing and occupation, besiegement, blockade, rounding up people, arrests, detentions, interrogations, murder inside the prisons, starving people inside and outside, of course. Despite all that, Israel has not succeeded to bomb and bully its way to any sustainable outcome. It hasn't. And it will never. You cannot defeat a nation, a people, only by the force of F-16s. Nations are not defeated this way. You cannot fight mothers and grandmothers and lawyers and taxi drivers and hairdressers. It's a nation. It's a people. When are we going to learn this lesson of history? Shouldn't we learn what happened in South Africa? Or in Algeria? Or in many other places? This is the limit of hard power, my friend. This is the limit of hard power. And it is the reason we are now seeing a genocide play out. This is exactly the reason. Because the more they discover that their hard power has no impact, the more they exercise hard power. And that's exactly how we got to a mindset of extermination, not just subjugation and oppression. Extermination. That's exactly why. This is the reason we are seeing a genocide playing out. This is the reason Israel has moved from ethnic cleansing to full-fledged genocidal. If you deliberately and willfully undermine chances of a political solution, as Israel has quite openly done, both with its stated opposition to ending its occupation and with its accelerated illegal colonial settlement expansion, the logic of hard power dictates that it must continue until extermination. That's it. Because if one Palestinian is left, that logic of hard power didn't work. If one. So my friends, in contrast to Israel, we, the Palestinian people, have very little by way of hard power. We don't have it. We don't have an army. We don't import from the US or being aided by the US all the last weaponry, F-35s, and we are certainly not a nuclear power. We don't even have the basic hard power requirements. And we don't have the economic and the financial. We don't have oil. Actually, we do. We have olive oil, I have to say. But we do not, nonetheless, have a significant hard power. However, we have a very significant soft power. And this is the discussion of today. We have a very significant, sustainable, powerful, everlasting soft power. It is our history, our heritage, our attachment to our land, our vibrant culture, which has withstood 76 years of Israeli attempts at erasing us. Withstanding 76 years of attempts at extermination and erasure is a testimony to the strength of the soft power of the Palestinians. That is our history, our heritage, our attachment to our land, our vibrant culture, and of course, our rights and the justness of our cause. Our culture sustains us, my friend, and I'm so glad, Mark, that you have picked the topic cultural diplomacy. Our culture, the Palestine culture, unites us. It does unite us, gives us solace. It is who we are. And why we may differ in the political arena as Palestinians. I'll tell you, Palestinian culture brings every Palestinian around the Maqloubi. We cherish our culture. Brings us together. It glues us together. Ours is an ancient people with an ancient culture rooted in our land for thousands of years. Thousands of years. You can't make it up. You can't just invent it. You can't order it from Wall Street or something, or Amazon. Our culture is ingrained in our souls, is deeply rooted in our people and in our land. I was born in a refugee camp in Gaza, by the way, in Rafah. And my earliest memories are of my older relatives, all Nakba survivors, coming together to cook. I remember maftool. In northern Africa, they call it couscous. Maftool. To cook, to share old songs from before the Nakba, to recite poetry. My aunts used to embroider clothes in traditional way, in which every stitch, every single stitch has a meaning. Every stitch has a reason. Every stitch tells a story. Every stitch tells a story. This was not politics to me as a child. It was more powerful than politics. It was who we are, our heritage, our identity, our history. It was our culture. And Palestine, as you all know, is rich globally rich. And even if you look at the UNESCO list of World Heritage, you will find at least 5 sites that are listed as a World Heritage in Palestine. Of course, including the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem, including the old town of Hebron, which is a World Heritage site. Batir village in Bethlehem, the land of olives and vines, and Tel Sultan in Jericho, and of course, all that is in the West Bank, but of course, we have also a listed site in Gaza, which is the Tel Amir in Gaza. And our culture and commitment to education has also allowed us to withstand. We have one of the highest literacy rates in the world and one of the highest per capita PhD graduates and holders worldwide. This is what kept us determined, steadfast, rooted, able to be resilient. And by the way, this explains to you why at the beginning of this genocide, Israel targeted the education sector. You know, they have destroyed by now 80% of Gaza's schools and 100% of Gaza's universities, because they know education is our lifeline. And they know by targeting education, they are targeting not only our history and our present, but they're targeting our future. Our future. Our filmmakers, my friend, our poets, our artists and musicians, our academics and intellectuals, you all know big names like Edward Said, right? And Mahmoud Darwish. Our writers and journalists all tell our story to a global audience. And now we have younger generations. We are very proud of the younger generations of our professionals. They tell it well. They tell our story very well. It is a compelling story. And it is a story that is increasingly well understood as the world begins to finally see through the myth, or I should have said the myths, of land without a people. You know that myth, land without a people, for a people without a land. See through the myths of divine entitlement, chosenness. There is no such a thing. God loves all of his sons and daughters equally. The world sees through the myths of self-defense against women and children. The vast majority of those slaughtered in Gaza, as you all know by now, are women and children. Almost 17,000 orphans we have who have lost either one parent or all of their parents. More than 16,000 children have been slaughtered over the last 10 months or so. So my friends, ours is a story that is grounded in our connection. That's what I'm trying to say. It is grounded not in politics, not in even political ambitions. It is grounded in our connection to our land. In the words of Mahmoud Darwish, our national poet, he wrote a poem that was entitled My Roots. And he goes, my roots took firm hold before the birth of time, before the beginning of the ages, before the cypress and olives, before the growth of pastures. My job, my friends, as a diplomat, especially as a Palestinian ambassador, the honor of my life, to a large degree consists in elaborating this soft power, to engage in cultural diplomacy, promote and support Palestinian artists and cultural events, and to educate my interlocutors about our history and our heritage. I do it with pride. I do it with love. I do it with passion. And I do it knowing that our culture has gone global, absolutely global. Our flag is now a symbol of freedom. The watermelon, a symbol of the dignity of our struggle, of our rights. You see it everywhere with ordinary people. You see our kufiya now being used, being by youngsters everywhere. It's a statement. It's an attachment to our culture because these are cultural symbols. And my friend, but cultural diplomacy needs teeth. It does need teeth. And that demands a functioning global order that takes its commitment to a universal values and international law seriously. That is the one thing that we are missing in Palestine and the rest of the world. The equal and consistent implementation of international law and an end to the double standards that see Western powers, certain Western powers, support a military occupier and its decades-old subjugation of an entire people, rather than the legitimate aspirations of liberty of a people under occupation. And may I qualify, when I say the West, I do not mean every country in the West. Because, you know, we have to salute countries like Spain, Ireland, Norway, Slovenia. Many countries in the world have taken the principled stance and position in the last few months and in the last years. But there are certain countries, the US tops the list, who remain to be an absolute backers of such grave, grave misuse of power and such grave illegality. So my friends, unlike hard power, soft power and cultural diplomacy holds out the promise of sustainable resolution. It does so because it appeals to our shared values, our common humanity. I see it. I see it when I share my culture, when I share a good meal, or I share a good poem. People's perception is completely different. Interaction is completely different. It asks us to understand and appreciate, that's the cultural diplomacy, to appreciate each other rather than fear each other. It is crucial in a world in which we face common existential threats from global warming to an unprecedented global refugee crisis, thanks to the hard power. These problems can only and will only be solved with global cooperation stemming from a mutual awareness that we, the human race, are in this together. There is no soul salvation. We can either resolve it for all or we are doomed, because we do have global issues. And look at the issue of Palestine in the last 11 months or so. It did not confine itself to the borders of Palestine. It is a global issue. And the ramifications is global, but so is many other issues. What future are we leaving for our children? What world are we leaving behind? That requires solid international cooperation. And mutual understanding is the first step towards peace, towards justice, in Palestine and anywhere else. Such understanding, and I've studied the history of conflict resolutions as much as I could, it all began with this word, understanding. Understanding. In Northern Ireland, it began with understanding. In South Africa, in the Balkans, everywhere else. Understanding. Understand the grievances. And for too long, we the Palestinian people, for too long, far too long, we were not allowed to express our grievances. And you may have followed at the beginning of this situation, all of you, how the media has treated us and me personally. They want to deflate the conversation. The victim is to be blamed all the time. But to talk about your grievances, to talk about what has been taking place for 76 years was not a priority. And whenever you have a chance to do so, they would take you to deflate you, to silence you. Understanding. Let the Palestinian people tell their story. Talk about their grievances. Let every people talk about their grievances. Let understanding be the common thing between us. And my friends, such understanding must also be wedded to a commitment to the rules, the rule of law. There has got to be rules. This is not just about grievances. It's about common shared rules, the rule of law. Why is this country so renowned? Why many people would like to live here or invest here? It's one word, the rule of law. They know here in this country there are solid court systems. There is the separation of power. You're safe. Even if your rights are infringed on, you have a recourse to justice. We need to apply that elsewhere. And the UK has to be consistent. If it accepts the rule of law domestically, it has got to accept the rule of law globally. And these rules must apply equally to all. No exceptions, no impunity, no one above the law. Why is Israel been put above the law for 76 years? Why? You know, Israel was established exactly around the very same time as the post-World War II global order, around the same time. And it has been in awe with that order ever since. In awe. And the powerful Western countries have actually established that, the world order, after the horrors of the Second World War, for the never again for all of us, but also established Israel as per the Balfour Declaration and all that followed, and they couldn't really match the two creations. And now Israel is dragging this whole international order into perhaps the dustbin of history, undermining it at every corner, because people are watching that, oops, we apply the rules only to certain people. Do you remember what the general prosecutor of the ICC, Karim Khan, said only a couple of months ago on a CNN interview? He said a Western big leader told him that the ICC was created for Russia and African countries. Seriously. Why? There are no criminals in the West? There are no criminals elsewhere? Anybody who aids Israel in its genocide is criminal. That's not me saying. That's the judges of the International Criminal Court and the judges of the International Court of Justice. And therefore, I'd like to conclude here, my friends, we are still some distance from that in Palestine to see all that happens. Even though recent ruling by the ICJ and the ICC suggest the institutions of the international law are beginning to find their ways on this cultural issue. On this very crucial issue. And it is a very crucial issue. Palestine, my friends, Palestine is truly a global issue, a global cause that is now widely identified as part of a wider anti-racist struggle. For the love of God, how heartwarming for me to see that the anti-racist demonstrations in London and all over the UK had the Palestine flag. To associate anti-racism, anti-bigotry, anti-hatred with my country and my flag is an honor. And this tells you the story that our cause has become a global cause. For everybody who believes in anti-racism, for everybody who wants to uproot hatred and bigotry, who wants to fight subjugation and oppression. And this is really a very historic moment. And when, not if, my friends, when we, the Palestinian people, finally secure our liberation in a state of our own, it will be a resounding victory for soft power and cultural diplomacy. And that will be a victory for us all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We want to get one or two questions, if it's allowed.
Of course.
Yes. Allow me to say, before, of course, I open the floor for the question, I would like to say one thing for our Excellency. Long time ago, some time ago, of course, I was in MOD, and of course, when they go to war, they ask the imams or sheikhs or leader of the community to come and they see, we want to go there, we want to go there, we want to go there. And of course, I was with Sir Houghton. Sir Houghton is the head of the three armies, head of the staff, 3 armies. We are very close friends, and we talking. And of course, I was the director of the Justice for Rohingya UK International. And I told her, Sir Houghton, you know, look at Burma, you send in all the or the arms and looking after 5,000, 10,000 police and what's happening? And can we stop it? And why they killing these Burman killing the Rohingya? He said, Dr. Ramsey, Sheikh, China is behind it. That's what he said. I said, Sir Houghton, you know who is behind me? He said, what? I said, behind me is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the God. He went one step back and he said, listen, Sir Houghton. And one I would like to say, our honorable the God, the Almighty God is behind the Palestine. It is behind the Palestine. God bless the Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Now, we get to one or two questions. Yes. Just short, sharp. You may not get answer, but of course you can get a question. Very short because we have many people to ask a question. Short. Very short, please. Okay. Yes.
Short first.
Sorry, who's given? Sorry.
Ali, okay, I can wait.
Salam. What an honor for me as a Palestinian to have you as our ambassador. You make us all very proud. We will never give up on the Palestinian people, but unfortunately, people in Palestine are starting to give up, even though we do see there's a lot of changes and our voices are getting louder. But what message would you give to our people in Palestine to just keep them hopeful, even though they're still suffering with genocide and seeing that Israel is still killing innocent people? Thank you.
The message, can you remind me of your name again?
Shahd.
Shahd, I'm very proud of you, Shahd. We're all proud of you.
Thank you.
And if there is any reason why I am personally always filled with hope, it's because of people like you, Shahd, and I meet many like you everywhere. And while the Palestinians inside have been subjected to an ethnic cleansing and a military occupation and subjugation and all that has been through history, they have remained on the land. And not only remained as passive victims, they remained building and developing. And we have produced one of the world-class institutions in education and health and what have you. And as I said in my earlier remarks, we produced and reproduced our culture to a global stage. But also our diaspora and our refugees in the exile. Many people like you, and I meet them everywhere. I meet them as CEOs of the city and CEOs of the big social media. I meet them as doctors. You know, the other day I asked how many Palestinian doctors there are in the NHS. And we were counting, we got to 550 only in the NHS consultants. And then it goes to all other fields. So a nation that was able to withstand all this and still to produce all this and to contribute to other nations wherever we go is a nation that has already won. We already won. We won in 1948 when we stayed. Okay, they kicked 2/3 of us, but the 1/3 stayed. And now the 1/3 is 51% of the population. The 1/3 is more than the colonizers who came. So we stayed. We remained. It's difficult, it's hard, it's genocidal. But in my opinion, Israel has lost in 1948 already. Okay, the hard power, I tried to describe it, and the backing of some powerful countries have enabled Israel to go all the way to what it is now, genocidal. But it's a matter of time. Because as long as a nation is still able to produce the thobe and the embroidery, you know, if you create and put together hundreds of armies, you think they could embroider one thobe? One? They can't. They can make bombers. They can put together, you know, big ships that can destroy, but they will not be able to do what. That comes with millennia. Thousands of sweats and tears and laughters of grandmothers and mothers and fathers. So I am hopeful because of that. That's number one. Number two, you've seen our people in the last many years, and not just the last 11 months. Sheikh Jarrah, 2021. You've seen the resilience. I mean, nobody is leaving. No one is leaving. We understand the brutality And you've seen also the heroism of our people in Gaza. I mean, this is the first time a genocide is being recorded by the ones who are genocided. This is the first time in history people are documenting their own execution. That's heroism. You want the world to know. And you've seen all of the big names and these young people, all the way to Bisan Audi, now if you follow her, documenting everything. And then the youth of the world catching that message and then spreading it like never before. There was such a huge intifada electronically where the images and the news have reached almost every household. You've seen also the challenge to the mainstream Western media, because media informs the rest of us. We did challenge the mainstream media, and the result is unprecedented change in the international public opinion. I did not expect to see 1 million British people in the streets of London in one go, and sustained over a period of 11 months almost. That's historic. And what is happening in the US is historic, and what is happening all over the world is historic. The incumbents by the youth, your generation, is historic. It happens only once every few generations. The last time it happened the way it did was during the anti-Vietnam War, 1968. To happen for Palestine in such a coordinated global manner. And those kids are, they call them kids, we shouldn't, they are actually the leaders, because the actual leaders have failed. Those leaders have taught us all the way forward. And by the way, they are succeeding, and in my opinion, they are coming back in September until their universities are going to divest. So there are so many sources of hope that we should clinch into, but the biggest source of hope is us and who we are as Palestinians.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I have not lived one day in your shoes to understand the volume and the depth of what you share with us. But in your own word, you mentioned that our shared culture and humanity help us to appreciate each other instead of to fear each other. And my question is more in the direction of hope. What do you see presently and also for the future, grams of hope that we can hold and look forward towards sustainable peace for the sake of our shared culture, if for nothing else, and also for the sake of our shared humanity? Is there any element of hope that you see that you can speak to us and also to anyone else listening? Thank you.
Yes, I do. As I said to Shahid before, there is abundance of hope. If you asked me this question maybe 30 years ago, I would tell you people were hopeful. Now the situation makes many people wonder, where are we going with this? But in the end, humans are humans, and in the very end, we will have to come to terms with the fact that there cannot be a zero sum. Can't. Netanyahu and the fanatics in his government think simply that there is no such a thing as Palestinian people. They have been acting on this for almost 25 years now. So whenever an opportunity comes to exterminate the Palestinian people, here they go, what they're doing. But that happened in many other areas before. And there comes a time when people realize that this is simply not possible. Now, is this time? I'm afraid not, my friend. We need to work a bit more, struggle a bit longer, be patient, believe in our hearts, because Israel is not about to produce a political leaders that would believe in a different direction, unfortunately. It pains me as a human being, before as a Palestinian, to see that the Israeli society for weeks were discussing, is raping prisoners legitimate or not? So we are not at that stage of understanding yet. Literally, there was a national debate, is raping prisoners legal and legitimate or not? With senior officials in the Israeli cabinet coming in the ring and saying, yeah, it is legal, and others are. even the beginning of the conversation is, even to have this as a discussion is heart-wrenching. So we are not close to that understanding I was trying to call for, and I do believe in. And what is the work requires to do that? Number one, if we really want to create understanding, we have to create equity, symmetry. And equity and symmetry begins with one word: accountability. War criminals have to be and must be held accountable. They must be behind bars. Because I assure you, this is not just about delivering justice to our many, many thousands of those that the Israeli genocide has actually killed. It's more than just justice, and justice is important. It's deterrence. And we need to create consequences for the Israeli larger public to realize that the path they are on is the wrong path. How do you create that? By creating severe consequences. Do you need bombs to do that? No. All what you need is international legality. Why is it difficult to think that when a country is accused officially at the highest international court of committing the biggest crime, which is the crime of genocide, is it difficult to ask that countries like the UK and the US immediately seize arms exportation and immediately employs an arms embargo? I'll tell you, this is not a demand. This is an obligation on governments like London and Washington. An obligation, a legal obligation. Why? If we are saying, and the ICJ said that Israel's occupation is unlawful and all of its settlements, expansion and existing are unlawful and must be all dismantled, what are we waiting for to impose sanctions? Remember the South Africa? How did Nelson Mandela get freed? By that. Because the world decided to suck oxygen out of apartheid South Africa. That's exactly how it happened. Impose sanctions, isolate, insulate. What's the difference here? What is the difference? Why don't we sanction not just as the previous UK government did, which did broke a taboo, I have to say, and we did welcome it, impose sanctions on handful of settlers. What do you mean? You mean there are legal settlers and illegal settlers? All settlers are war criminals. So we need to impose sanctions. The moment we start doing that and delivering a message that you cannot keep going in that direction is a moment when you will see that there is beginning to understand each other. But before that, like any human being, they would want to have the cake and eat it too. If you can have the biggest villa right in the middle, in the heart of the West Bank, because it's much cheaper, is a fraction of the price if you get it in Tel Aviv, and then the government is giving you tax subsidies and sending you all the army to protect you and creating for you all the infrastructure and high roads to connect you to your work in 20 minutes, why don't you go there? If you ask all the Israeli colonial settlers in the West Bank, why are you there? More than 2/3 of them will tell you we're there for economic reasons, not ideological. So why don't we hit them in the pockets and make sure that this is not viable economically? This is the way we create the understanding, and then we create a new dynamics. And the list goes on of what is required from the outside world to make sure that we go in a different direction. But that does not include talking again. Talking again between the wolf and the lamb doesn't work.
We have two more questions. 5 minutes we have. 5 minutes we have. Very short and sharp, please. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum, Husam Zomlot. That was a very powerful and moving speech. Thank you very much. I'm Ruby from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. In terms of Israel and Palestine, diplomacy has failed multiple times. International law has been ignored multiple times. How do you see a way to peace? How do we get countries who refuse to understand, refuse to abide by international law, to abide by international law? How do weaker countries go about trying to get powerful nations to abide by international law, to create an understanding and to create accountability?
Please. The last question, you want to? Yes, here you. And I said both. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My name is Pardon Tafumane. I'm from Zimbabwe. I've watched the Middle East or Palestine wars, as you call it. Do you find yourself, I mean, I'm looking at history, going back to history. Israel and Palestine, if I'm correct, you are brothers together. Do you see yourself having a two-state existence that can be tolerant one to the other for the sake of peace?
My friend from the PSC, how do we get the international community to abide by international law? A very relevant question. There are two ways primarily to do that. Either by governments, working with governments, and I can attest to you, we've been working with governments a lot on that. Some deliver. Some we salute, like South Africa, who took Israel to the International Court of Justice, charging it with the crime of genocide, and now Israel is officially on trial for genocide. But also, the new British government has taken some way down the line of committing to international legality, and we must give credit when credit is due. We have had many issues with the previous government, trying to pursue them to respect the international rule of law. But the current government has resumed funding to UNRWA on week 1. On week 2, they pulled out the intervention at the ICC, and we did appreciate that and publicly said we very much welcome it. And of course, we worked with them towards that. And the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, said that they fully respect the independence of the ICC and the ICJ, and that's all what we want. We want nothing else. Respect the independence of these institutions. Do not meddle, do not intervene. And thirdly, we are working with them on the arms embargo. Here comes the second source of pressure that we need more, not only governments, but the people of the governments. I'll tell you, the UK, the new UK government, would it have done these things and would not do the third and the fourth and the fifth, because the list is long, unless we work with the people. And the people of the UK, the people of the US, the people everywhere, you see the activism, you see the commitment, you see the beginning of a global movement, in every sense, by the way. So we need to work with people more to make sure that people are holding their governments accountable, so their governments are held accountable by the international system. That's the bottom line. And that's why you see maybe more than half of my time, okay, half of my time is with my team, Marwan here, Yaghi, our political council, and others. Half of our time is with the government and the parliament. But the other half is with the people, if not even more, because that's the main arena of change. We need to work more, and I must commend the PSC for the historic mission you have done over the last 11 months, historic in every sense. Bringing hundreds of thousands of people together, growing into more than 100 branches now, and seeing your impact all over the place. We're very fortunate to have you here as a central piece of organizing solidarity on Palestine. So we are on our way. Change is happening. Sometimes it's slow, but it's happening. This is the first time ever the issue of Palestine has become an election issue. Not only in the UK, but also in the US, as you may have been following. It has not been the case. It was always the other way, right? Now we are an election issue. I think politicians realize that if you do not take the side of international law vis-a-vis Palestine, a big chunk of the British people will not be happy about it and might actually punish you for it. And by the way, when I say a big chunk of the British people, I do not mean only the Muslim community. No, it's much bigger. It's a cross community in the UK that they consider Palestine now to be a central piece of their decision when it comes to casting their vote. And that is going to happen in the US, as you may have been following. This is big, and we need to continue working with the people so the people can bring their governments on board. Israelis and Palestinians are brothers. In our culture, we call them cousins rather than brothers. The story of Ismail and Ishaq and all that. If you think, my friend, the problem is social, think again. I mean, I'm sure in the social sense, we will not have a problem with them. I'm sure many of us would find best friends. Sure, many of us, I have many good, one of my best friends are Jewish now. This is not a problem of human interaction. But so far as they are occupiers, colonizers, besiegers, imposing on us on a system of apartheid, we only see them as soldiers, because that's all what we see, my brother. You are my brother now. We don't see anything else. Go to the West Bank, the occupied West Bank. Go to anywhere. You only see Israelis as aggressors, confiscating your very rights, your existence, your right to move, your right to work, killing you at will. You know, poor you if you happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, at the wrong checkpoint. Arresting you at will for endless period of time, open-ended, under something called administrative, which means they have no charge against you, they have nothing, they just want you there. I'm talking thousands of people, including children. So I'm telling you this because many people say, why don't you talk to each other? This isn't just about that. This is about us seeing them not as occupiers, seeing them as human beings. But how do we see them as a human being unless their occupation ends? So the journey of becoming cousins and good relations only begins when the occupation ends. Before that, my friend, the relationship is a relationship that is, I'm not going to quote harsh words now, but it's not a balanced relationship. It's a relationship literally of a soldier manning a checkpoint. And a Palestinian person who is unmasked. But I am a strong believer in the power of humanity, and I'm a strong believer that one day we will live together in that region. And I follow our history. I know that my grandparents have received many fleeing Jewish people from Europe and everywhere with oranges. We open our homes and our hearts, and we should never regret it, never. And I know the history of the Muslim world vis-a-vis the Jewish people and the flourishing and the protection. And read the history. I mean, the Jewish people have really flourished the most in Muslim countries, all the way to Andalusia, by the way. So the history is there. The anomaly was since the Nakba and the establishment of Israel, and the insistence that there is a land without a people for a people without a land, the insistence on the supremacy that there are a certain people that have more rights, that have exclusivity, exclusive claims. And then you ask them, who gave you that claim? God. Seriously? Which God? Your God, my God, their God? And there began all the issues. And no matter how much you fix it first by making sure that you deal with them on equal basis. Once all these ideas hopefully are gone and dismantled, and once we all accept that we are one children under one God and under one rule. Thank you.